Hello, my friends. It's Monday, November 17th, 2025, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your red state refugee. And welcome to the Radical Russ Show, your home for pothead political punditry, coming to you from Rolla J Studios in Southern Oregon. On this week's Smoke Session, the U.S. House votes tomorrow on releasing the full Epstein files, which Donald Trump totally wants to release, except he first has to investigate the Democrats who are on the list that is a hoax they created because Biden wouldn't release the files that totally exonerate Trump. Opening the government just killed the hemp industry. Does marijuana legalization show a path to blue state soft secession? Marjorie Taylor Greene's face turn reveals Trump's weakness. FBI busts more non-white athletes in sports gambling scandals. Could Idaho finally pass medical marijuana or kill it for good in 2026? And my rant on the need for a Ninth Amendment Foundation. But before we get to all the serious political stuff, we've got time for 3 quick hits. We have a very marijuana-focused show in politics this week, and we open it with some sad news to announce the passing of Julie Monteiro, known as Nurse Juhlzie to the cannabis community, on Veterans Day. She was one of the pioneers of the medical cannabis movement in the West, who lent her voice to many panels, presentations, and podcasts, including mine, over the formative years when medical marijuana was still seen by the mainstream as subterfuge for marijuana legalization. Her work lobbying in Nevada, Oregon, and Washington, D.C. helped craft the laws that still govern medical cannabis use. She founded or co-founded the Coalition for Patient Rights, the Cannabis Nurses Magazine, and the Cannabis Nurses Network, and other local cannabis advocacy and research organizations. Nurse Juhlzie was born April 21st, 1970, and passed peacefully in bed of natural causes at the age of 55. Our condolences go out to her friends and family. May her memory be a blessing. All right, it's been a while since I've caught you up on our hashtag TubiTVNight. That's where I go through the free Tubi app to find free movies and TV shows to share with you, because if you're poor like me, you can't afford these fancy schmancy Netflix, Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Paramount Plus, Peacock. My God, how many subscriptions you got to watch the TV anymore? So I find you some gems here on Tubi, and there's one I caught last night that I totally recommend. 2 thumbs up. It's from 2020, a movie called @Zola, like @ZOLA, like a handle on Twitter. And it recounts this 147 tweet thread from 2015 from our protagonist, Zola, who is a stripper who meets a girl, and the two of them go to Tampa to make money, and hijinks ensue. That's all I'm going to tell you about it. It's a heck of a flick. Lots of twists and turns, and definitely worth a watch for free. Check it out. Hashtag TubiTVNight @Zola from 2020. On the musical tip, I wanted to catch you up with some classic rock trivia. What do you think is the most streamed album of the 20th century? No, it's not anything by the Beatles. It's not Nirvana's Nevermind. It's not Michael Jackson's Thriller. It's not Dr. Dre, The Chronic. None of those are the most streamed album on Spotify that was made in the 20th century. That belongs to Rumours by Fleetwood Mac. And I heard this podcast, one of John Fugelsang's guests the other day. He had, this guy had written a book about the enduring legacy of Fleetwood Mac's Rumours album, which is enormously popular among the Zoomers. The Zoomers love Rumours. It's their favorite album from the 20th century, or the 1900s, as they call it. In fact, it even hit number 17 on the charts this year. And when they discussed it, they talked about how other albums from the 70s, other albums for the 20th century all sound kind of dated, but Rumours sounds fresh and new. And I think a lot of it also has to do with the dynamic of the women and the men in the band and all their conflicts, and how Rumours was such a honest and vulnerable album, laying bare all of those feelings that can still be felt during any time by any generation. I think that might explain some of it. But interesting to know that Rumours is the most streamed album from the 20th century.
Our top story tonight.
Our top story tonight.
Alicia Francisco Franco is still dead.
Our top story this week, as it has been for the last few months, is Epstein. Oh, the House Oversight Committee released 3 emails, pretty damning emails from the Epstein estate. In response, the House Republicans released another 20,000 more. As if throwing more paper would throw everyone off the scent. That only revealed that Trump's name is the most mentioned name in the 20,000 emails, like 1,600 mentions of Trump's name in the emails. And you know, these emails aren't telling us anything we don't already know. That Trump knew about the girls. That was one of the things in the emails. He knew about the girls, knew what was going on. That Trump was a guest at Epstein's in 2017 for Thanksgiving, long after Trump had said he'd kicked him to the curb for being a creep. He knew what was going on. He was still having him over Thanksgiving while he was president of the United States. So we know how bad this is. Everybody knows it. We've heard the testimony of the victims, who, by the way, released a very compelling video. If you haven't seen the video, I'll have it linked up in my show notes or up on my blog, or check out my Blue Sky feed at RadicalRuss.com. Just an amazing video calling for the release of the Epstein files. This is the vote that's taking place tomorrow, Tuesday. I'm recording this on Monday. Of course, Adelita Grijalva was sworn in as a member of Congress, finally, after having to wait 7 weeks. But she was finally sworn in. The first thing she does is sign the Epstein discharge petition, becoming the 218th signature. And what that does is it just triggers kind of these actions to happen. It's a way of getting around a reluctant Speaker of the House. If a majority of the House says, no, we do want to vote on this, then we vote on it. And so she became the 218th, and that compelled MAGA Mike Johnson to have to hold this vote, which is going to be happening on Tuesday. And the call is that there's going to be a lot of Republican defections on this, because of course there are. Who wants to be in the campaign ad next fall? Congressman so-and-so voted to protect pedophiles. He voted not to release the Epstein files. What does Donald Trump have to hide, right? So get on the phone and let's see if we can turn some of these Congress people to force them to have to show in a vote that they're going to split from Donald Trump on this issue. Who's going to stick with him? Who's going to split? I've got some numbers for you that have to do with my background. Of course, my congressperson is Representative Cliff Bentz. He's the only Republican who represents the state of Oregon in any fashion. We have 2 Democratic senators. We have 5 other Democratic representatives, although Janelle Bynum, but nominally Democratic. Cliff Bentz is the only Republican. He represents where I live here in southern Oregon, the major cities here being Ashland, Grants Pass, and Medford. So if you're in that area, feel free to call Cliff Bentz at his Washington number, which is 202-225-6730. And all the numbers I'm going to give you are 202-225s. So if you're just listening and need to remember it, all I got to remember is the last 4, because they're all 202-225. Representative Cliff Bentz, 202-225-6730. The 2 representatives of the state of Idaho are Mike Simpson and Russ Fulcher, hardcore rock-rib conservative red state Republicans that they are. Give them a call. Mike Simpson's number is 202-225-5531. Mike Simpson, 5531. And Representative Russ Fulcher, 202-225-6611. 6611 for Russ Fulcher. Tell them you want them to vote to release the Epstein files. I think a lot of these Republicans are going to turn. And it's going to be a big vote, big bipartisan vote to release the Epstein files. Now, Trump's trying to get ahead of this. Trump's trying to get ahead of this by saying, no, so I want, go ahead, I want to release the Epstein files, total transparency, release the files. Except, of course, he knows they won't get released because he's got all sorts of roadblocks from them getting released. This is like the tough guy, the guy trying to be tough. Come on, I'll take you on. And he's got like 5-6 people holding him. Let me go. I'll kick your ass. Let me go. Yeah, he knows they're not going to let him go. The cops are already there. Big tough guy. That's what Trump's doing right now. This is all bluster. He doesn't want these files released. He knows there's something terrible in them. And I'll get to that in a second. But, he's trying to get ahead of this, saying, don't release the files. He's already got, first of all, the vote in the House to release the files doesn't just magically presto release the files. That sends a vote over to the Senate. The Senate has to then vote whether or not they're going to release the files. Now, could there be a majority there to release the files? You know, they only got 3 over there on the Republican side. They got a 3-vote margin. Could they lose a Rand Paul, a Josh Hawley, Lisa Murkowski? Susan Collins has got a real tough battle. So could they lose 3? If they did, if they lost 3 Republicans that voted to release the Epstein files, that's a 50-50 tie there, assuming none of the Democrats defect. And I even think John Fetterman will not defect on something like this. 50-50 tie means it'd be broken by J.D. Vance. Does J.D. Vance want to be the guy who breaks the tie and says, no, we keep the Epstein files hidden? I think it would be a matter of how secure Donald Trump is at that point, because there's a chance there for J.D. Vance, if he knows it's going to destroy Trump, vote to release him, he's next in line for the presidency. But then that vote, even if it passed the Senate, even if 4 Republicans defected and he didn't need J.D. Vance, it then goes to the desk of the president. Not the Resolute desk, which apparently is sitting at Mar-a-Lago now. Have you seen the reports of that? He's just hoisted the Resolute desk to Mar-a-Lago. But anyway, go to whatever desk he's sitting at. And then does Mr. I want to release the files? No! Because then he can do a veto and say, well, I wanted to release the files, but Attorney General Bondi, totally on her own, with no direction from me, from the independence of the Justice Department, is investigating the Epstein files, which are a hoax, but she's investigating them, so we can't release them because it's an ongoing investigation, and there we go. But I wanted them released, I just couldn't release them. That's the game they're going to play, folks. That's the game they're going to play. So, what could be so terrible in these Epstein files? This is the other part of the emails people have been talking about. I got this from my lady love. I'm out driving the other day, and she sends me this just little cryptic message. Trump blew Clinton. Like, what? Trump blew Clinton? What? So, go and research it. You find the email. There's the email that says they have the photo of when Trump blew Bubba. And apparently, Bubba here being Clinton's nickname, allegedly. No, folks, I am not buying it. I am not buying this. First of all, like, I can't even, I have a pretty vivid imagination. And I can't wrap my mind around what set of circumstances would have to occur in a particular order that leads to Donald Trump giving Bill Clinton head. No, I cannot conceive of it. Quantum mechanics, sure. General relativity, no problem. Trump blowing Bill Clinton, I can't wrap my mind around that. No, I don't buy it. So there's other speculation, because apparently there's some Texas mega donor, maybe oil guy, I don't know, named Bubba. Maybe they're referring to that guy as Bubba. I saw some other speculation said that there's some Russian word boba that means punk or something, and that it's Vladimir. He blew Vladimir Putin. Come on. Although, it sure would make that whole Helsinki photo from his first term make a lot more sense, wouldn't it? All stoop-shouldered and Putin's all smiling. I would make a sense. Why they wouldn't have any translators in the room. Why they wouldn't have anybody taking notes. Kick everybody out of the room. Get Donald his knee pads. I don't know. I just can't. Like I said, I can't wrap my mind around it. But I can't also come up with what else it could be. Why would somebody email, do you have that photo? Was it a joke? Was it a gag, a bachelor party? I don't know, but man. But it does say something, though, that a scandal like that would probably damage him 10 times worse than being caught raping teenage girls. Isn't that wild? That getting consensual oral sex from an adult man would sink Donald Trump's political career more than the serial raping of children. I mean, and speaking of children, we got to talk about this Megyn R. Kelly thing. I love that's her name now, Megyn R. Kelly. Let me find the clip for you. I don't want to take her words out of context. Let me play the whole clip for you.
That Jeffrey Epstein, in this person's view, was not a pedophile. This is this person's view, who was there for a lot of this, but that he was into the barely legal type. Like he liked 15-year-old girls.
Well, to start this discussion off, Megyn R. Kelly has a problem with the definition of a couple words, and that would be barely and legal. So legal in this context would be someone who is of 18 years of age, right? Someone who's legal, someone who's an adult, who's legal. I guess it might differ from state to state when we're talking about the sexual age of consent. But let's just stick with 18 here for this discussion. So legal would be 18. And so she's talking like someone that was like 15, the barely legal type. Well, barely legal would mean you've just gotten over the legal age, wouldn't it? I mean, you are 18 just barely. Like, if you're close to being close to being 18, but not 18 yet, you'd be barely unlegal, right? And 15, that's a 3-year gap. That's not barely. 3 years to a 15-year-old is what? Doing the math in my head, 20% of their life? That's hardly barely.
That he wasn't into like 8-year-olds, but he liked the very young teen types that could pass for even younger than they were, but would look legal to a passerby.
Okay, so your defense of the guy you're saying wasn't a pedophile is the fact that he liked the barely legal types who were 15 years old who could then look like someone younger than 15 years old? That's a hell of a defense, isn't it?
We have yet to see anybody come forward and say, I was I was under 10. I was under 14 when I first came within his purview.
Except we have that lawsuit that was withdrawn from Katie Johnson, who alleges she was 13 when she was being passed around between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. And there are a few other victims who were 14 at the time they were passed around by Jeffrey Epstein, as alleged in these reports. But go on, keep digging.
There's a difference between a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old. You know, it's just whatever.
There's a difference between a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old, whatever. Okay, well, let's think about that for a second. A 5-year-old is a child who has a body you cannot touch and they cannot consent to be touched. And a 15-year-old is a child who has a body that you can't touch and they can't consent to be touched. Really, the only difference between these two children who you cannot touch and they cannot consent to be touched is the fact that the 15-year-old has gone through puberty, which makes Megyn Kelly's argument a little bit like, oh, she was wearing a short skirt, so she deserved it. It's disgusting, and it's frightening given the fact that Megyn R. Kelly has a 14-year-old daughter herself. Maybe someone should call Child Protective Services. And it's a hell of a time to be offering this sort of equivocation, shall we say, on pedophilia at a time when you're launching your brand new Sirius XM talk channel. Let's see how long that lasts. Maybe we should contact Sirius and let them know that pedophile protectors do not belong on our satellite airwaves.
Listen, my friend, this is a matter of national importance.
You know, when I started doing this podcast again, I tongue-in-cheek referred to it as pothead political punditry, because who am I to be offering my insight and analysis on these imports of national affairs and world politics? And, well, what the hell? I got an opinion just like anybody else does. Why shouldn't I? But boy, this week, being the pothead political pundit is really going to pay some dividends, because almost everything happening on my show today has to do with my main wheelhouse, my area of expertise, because in this continuing resolution, the end of the shutdown that just happened for our federal government, the Republicans in the Senate slipped in an amendment that pretty much just killed the non-textile hemp industry in the United States. And 15 Democrats voted with them on that amendment. So it's a bipartisan killing of the nascent hemp industry. Now, you got to understand what we're talking about here, so let me break it down. There's hemp, the hemp industry that existed before, let's say 2018, maybe a little before 2014, which was something we all know from even colonial times. The sails and the rope and the rigging and the textile and the hemp cloth that was used like a canvas. You know, hemp, like the big tall reedy plant. And soon, that evolved into also including some hemp seed oils and hemp seed products, so edible hemp seed stuff. And this evolved all the way up and through the 1980s when the DEA decided to crack down on it, because the hemp stuff, like you got hemp milk or hemp oil or hemp butter, right, would have these trace amounts of THC in it. Just tiny, tiny amounts of THC, which is the molecule that causes the high, the head high effect, right? So these hemp products, even though they had these tiny amounts of THC in them, the DEA, in the war on certain American citizens using non-pharmaceutical, non-alcoholic, tobacco-free drugs, cracked down on that. That's weed. That's the get-you-high stuff. And we're going to bust in the shops and pull down on the lotions and the soaps and all these things that have THC in them. And there was a series of lawsuits, most notably HIA, the Hemp Industries Association, versus DEA. I think this was 1980, early 80s, that sued over this, saying, look, it's this small, tiny amounts of THC doesn't make it marijuana because it can't get you high. You can't possibly smoke it or eat it enough to get high on this stuff. It's hemp. It's not pot. It's not weed. It's not ganja. It's just hemp. Let us have our soaps and our oils and our hemp powder, protein powders, and all that kind of stuff. Nobody's getting high on that. And they won. And so that was the beginning of this nascent little hemp industry to make all these like hemp nutrients and hemp supplements. So this industry began, but it's still kind of a slow roll on this industry because, you couldn't really grow hemp in the United States. You had to import it from elsewhere. It was expensive to do so. There's other things we have now that have supplanted hemp, like nylon rope and, other, polyester canvases and all these other things, right? So hemp didn't really take off as kind of a niche thing for hippies. Well, fast forward to the 2000s, we got medical marijuana taking off in the 1990s. We get the legalization of marijuana taking place in the 2010s. And then around 2014, we had the CBD movement where everybody discovered that this other cannabinoid, CBD, that everybody been trying to breed out of pot because it reduces your high. It actually, levels it a bit. Nobody wanted the CBD, so it was almost bred out of the plant until these guys, the Stanley brothers in Colorado, found this one particular strain called Hippie's Disappointment because it wouldn't get you high. It had so much CBD in it, it wouldn't get you high. They were going to trash the thing, but they found out that this CBD molecule actually helps people with seizures, people with epilepsy. And he started giving this little girl, Charlotte Figi, the late Charlotte Figi, and it helped with her Dravet syndrome, this devastating epileptic seizure disorder. And it got featured on the Sanjay Gupta special, Weed, on CNN, and everybody started touting this miracle of CBD that could heal these epileptic kids and didn't get them high. It had nothing to do with getting high. It had no, very scant amounts of THC in it. So that began the CBD movement, and CBD became popular, and grannies started using it and giving it to dogs to get them to sleep and people to calm their nerves and so forth. And the CBD movement kind of took off. But again, hard to get it because you had to get it from cannabis plants that are federally illegal and were illegal still in most states. Fast forward now to 2018. You got the Farm Bill, which is an appropriations bill that Congress passes every so often to fund the agricultural industry and pass regulations for it. And Mitch McConnell, of all people, senator from Kentucky, seeking to revive hemp as a cash crop. Again, the original hemp cash crop, the one that makes fiber and ropes and textiles, passed the Farm Bill in 2018. They added this hemp legalization. So now hemp is legal federally in the United States. It's distinguished from marijuana, which is still illegal federally in the United States, despite what 25 states have to say about it. But federally, hemp would be distinct from marijuana in that hemp would be stuff that has less than 0.3% THC in it by volume, right? Less than 0.3%. Not enough. You can't get high off it. And in this Farm Bill, they added a provision that said anything that you can extract or process or make out of this hemp that has less than 0.3% THC is perfectly legal everywhere in the United States. Now, I know what they were intending with that. But also, I know stoners. I know my people. And you give us the slightest sliver crack of a loophole, and we will drive a Mack truck through that motherfucker. And that is what happened with the 2018 Farm Bill. Because once you said anything I can get out of a hemp plant is legal, well, I can make anything out of a hemp plant I can make out of a cannabis plant. I just need more of those hemp plants. Right? Like, take a standard cannabis plant, say it's 15% THC by volume, right? And I want to make some THC stuff out of it. All right, I grow a plant, I extract that 15% THC. If a hemp plant has 0.3% THC, how many hemp plants do I need to increase the, how big a crop do I need to match that 15% cannabis plant? Well, do the math, right? You need 15 times roughly 3 or 4, so 45, 50 plants of hemp. I can extract the same amount of THC out of them as I can get from one that has 15% THC, and boy, the floodgates open from there. Suddenly, this is THC stuff that was extracted from hemp, and we can put it in sodas and gummies and all sorts of other sorts of things, lotions and creams. Soon enough, people all across the United States are able to get all these products that can get you high. And it also led to this designer THC market where they tweak some of the molecule. Like, okay, it's not Delta 9 THC that's illegal under the federal statute that makes it marijuana. It's Delta 8 THC. We flipped a little molecule there. It's Delta 10. We flipped a little thing over there. Oh no, this is THCV. So any possible configuration of THC molecule that wasn't technically illegal as federal marijuana became legal as a hemp-derived product. Okay. So that's where it brings you to today, where that amendment was just added in that makes it now so that your hemp stuff isn't 0.3% by volume. No. Was it 0.4 milligrams or 4? I forget where the decimal point is. It really doesn't matter. 4 milligrams per container, per item. Yeah, so that makes it so some stuff that was even legal before the 2018 Farm Bill that said all this stuff you can get out of hemp is legal, way back to the 1980s after HIA versus DEA, where they said, okay, if it's 0.3%, you can have your lotions and your soaps and all that. Even that's we've gone back farther than 1980 now in our hemp laws. We've gone back to the day where the only legal things from hemp are stuff you can't put in your body. Hemp cloth, right? Hemp rope. That's how far back we've gone on it. And 15 Democrats in the Senate voted along with that. Now, it also brings up one of my personal peccadillos, and that is throughout my entire career trying to legalize marijuana, I always dealt with this separation of the cannabis movement. The hemp people never wanted to be allied with the cannabis people. They always wanted to keep us at arm's length. It's always, well, our stuff doesn't get you high. We're all about an agricultural crop, not getting people high. And then when the CBD movement popped up, the CBD people were like, well, we're CBD medical marijuana. We're not the intoxicating medical marijuana. We're just the CBD. We keep you guys at arm's length, you potheads. And then as we got all the designer THCs coming up, it was all, we got ours now. And there are exceptions. There have been people who have been using this loophole in the Farm Bill to build up their businesses, and in building their businesses then plow a lot of that profit back into lobbying and activism trying to get laws changed. And I applaud the few who have done that. But the majority of them are just the same money guys who would be opening a sports card store or a head shop or anything else they could do to just extract money from the cannabis community and never put a dime of it back into legalizing the whole plant. Complete marijuana legalization for everyone, which I've always promoted the fact that if you're not going to stand for the stoners who want to get high on it, it's like the Niemöller poem. First they came for the designer THC industry. Then they came for the CBD industry. Then they'll come for the legalization. Then they'll come for the medical marijuana. We are one people, one plant, one fight. You cannot separate a non-intoxicating marijuana from a marijuana. Cannabis is cannabis is cannabis. Legalize it all for everyone. We're well over 60, we're at 70% national support for legalizing the whole plant, no matter what anybody intends to do with it. Let's stop this piecemeal, state-by-state half measures. Democrats get serious about this, campaign nationally on ending the insanity of a state-by-state patchwork of marijuana laws, deschedule cannabis, take it out of the Federal Controlled Substances Act, legalize it nationally, and everyone stick together. We must hang together, or we will surely hang separately.
Liberals, intellectuals, peacemongers, idiots!
All right, time to look to my left and see what the Democrats have been up to this week. And a joke came across my desk. I've seen it before, but in the wake of the shutdown, it made me laugh. And the joke is, if a genie offered the Democrats 3 wishes, the Democrats would negotiate that down to 1 wish, and then they'd wish on something they think the GOP might like. Yeah, that's kind of funny. This shutdown that we just ended, and now the government is back in session. You know, my podcast last week, I was just hair on fire, talk me off the ledge, because once again, the Democrats retreated to Democrats' cave. The spelunking adventures continue in Democrats' cave. They gave away the 43-day shutdown in exchange for a Republican promise. Didn't get them to back down on the health care subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. And I spent the week listening to a bunch of podcasts, and particularly Tim Miller and the guys out at the Bulwark. I listened to his podcast, and he painted it as a better situation than maybe I was looking at, and maybe it's a draw. I heard one person say, look, you can't win a game with chicken with someone who wants to crash. Right? You can't win a game of chicken with someone who wants to crash. The Republicans want the government shut down. They want it not to exist. So threatening the government not to exist, well, it'll hurt people, it'll shut down the air traffic. They want that. They want to inflict pain. So it was just a matter of how much pain were people willing to accept to be able to get our healthcare subsidies that they never were going to give us. They want to kill Obamacare. This is what they want to do. So really the best that the Democrats could hope for is to draw attention to the fact that it is 100% the Republicans who want to kill you. It is 100% the Republicans' fault that they want you to die. And if you look at through that frame, maybe it was a draw. Maybe it was a bit better than a draw, because going into it, there was kind of still the both sidesism. Coming out of it, everyone's absolutely 100% crystal clear that the Republicans were willing to starve our kids to force us to kill our health care. So in exchange, we managed to at least feed the kids and get the people their jobs back and get their back pay. Even though that's the law, we got the Republicans to agree to follow the law. I guess it's kind of a win. So maybe I'm not as upset about it as I was last week. And, you know, judging by what's happened since the House has come back into session and Epstein has become the focus again, and things are going crazy in MAGA world with their battles whether Nazis are good or not, maybe it was the right move. Maybe in hindsight, this was the right thing to do. But definitely the messaging around it was another Democratic failure. First of all, Angus King, and I know he's not a Democrat, he's an independent from Maine, but Angus King coming out there and said, well, we tried to stand up to Donald Trump and it just didn't work. Golly gee, he's just too tough for us. We're so weak, we couldn't do anything about it. That's just the worst possible thing you could have said. The messaging is Donald Trump held hostages. Donald Trump took your kids' food hostage in order to pass his draconian cuts to your health care. And I think despite themselves, that message is getting out, that people are starting to understand that that's the problem, that the Republicans want us dead. They do not care about us. They don't care about you. Funny how, like, the most compelling ad of the political campaign was Donald Trump is, or Kamala Harris is for they, them. Donald Trump is for you. Really, no, Donald Trump is for Donald Trump and his rich buddies. That's who Donald Trump is for. And I think people are starting to understand that. Some other notes about this. I want to note how 4 Democratic women senators, the 2 women from Nevada and the 2 women from New Hampshire, were part of the Origami 8 who folded on the Senate side for the government shutdown. 4 Democratic women. Now, there are 16 Democratic women in the Senate, and there are 10 Republican women in the Senate. 4 Democratic women joined with the 10 Republican women versus the 12 Democratic women who voted to keep the shutdown going. So if just women senators were the only people who had anything to say about it, it went 14-12 to end the shutdown. I don't know what you want to make of that, but it's a fact. The other thing to note, when it came over to the House side, Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the House Democrats, was urging his caucus to vote no. 6 Democrats crossed the aisle, some of the usual suspects like Cuellar and Glusenkamp Perez and Golden, I think. But 6 of these blue dogs went and crossed over and voted on the Republican side, while 2 Republicans crossed over and voted on the Democratic side. So, when it came down to aisle crossers in the House, it went 6-2 to reopen the government. 3 times as many Democrats defected as Republicans. I think, again, that says something about leadership or the lack of it. And one final thing to get to here on the Democratic side, I guess, maybe there's a lefty side. I saw a post come up on Medium, and it was about a roadmap to soft secession. People have been talking about this soft secession, where the blue states, it is noted, contribute far more to the tax base in the United States than they receive from the federal government. The blue states are the payer states, and the red states are the taker states, generally speaking. So it comes up from time to time, this idea of soft secession, that we shouldn't fund this fascist federal government, that the blue states should withhold their federal tax revenue until the federal government ends its fascistic ways. And every time this has come up, I've kind of pointed out that it's, nice fantasy, but the state doesn't pay the federal taxes. The employer pays the federal taxes. He takes it out of your paycheck, FICA and, whatever the other taxes are, and sends that to the feds. And then you, if you owe any more taxes after that, you fill out a form and you send your taxes to the feds. So if you wanted to starve the feds, you'd have to get every employer to stop sending the money in, and every citizen to, on their W-2s, file exempt, or to not file their IRS taxes, and then people are going to be worried about getting busted by the IRS, and that, etc. How is that going to work? So this article in Medium points out that the states could pass a law that forces all the employers to pay their federally required taxes to a state escrow tax service. And then that state escrow tax service then makes conditions upon the federal government based on auditing what the taxpayer money is going to be used for, that determines whether or not the state releases some or any of their federal tax revenue to the government. And in defending this idea, the author brings out marijuana legalization and points out that marijuana legalization is completely illegal federally. But the states went ahead and did it anyway, legalized their own state laws, irrespective of any federal law, and the feds haven't done anything about it, and the states have gone ahead and legalized because the feds don't have the resources to come in and bust every pot shop in California and Oregon and Washington and all the 25 legal states and all the commerce that goes on with that. They just don't have the resources. So the states could learn from marijuana legalization, use that model to not pay federal taxes. It's an interesting thought experiment, and people that know more about law would maybe want to weigh in on this, but my initial impression of this is they're not quite the same. First of all, the idea that the feds didn't try to enforce marijuana laws is only someone who's looking at marijuana legalization from 2012 on, not looking at the medical marijuana that started in San Francisco all the way back in the 1980s that led to the marijuana legalization. And I can assure you, plenty of people in California got raided. Plenty of people, including my lady love, got raided in Oregon. Lots of people went to jail. Lots of people lost millions of dollars. And that wasn't just the enforcement actions against the patient groups and the co-ops and the dispensaries. There was also enforcement actions that were attempted at the state and federal level, like the Clinton administration issuing memos. Was it a memo? I don't remember if it was an executive order. I don't recall. But basically making it illegal for doctors in the state of California to even mention medical marijuana to their patients. It was already federally illegal to prescribe it because it's a Schedule I drug. But the California law and all the medical laws that followed after that don't require a federal prescription. They require a doctor's recommendation. The doctor says it's okay, you can have it. Clinton tried to stop that. Clinton tried to stop doctors from being able to tell patients about medical marijuana. It went all the way to the Supreme Court in a case called Conant v. Walters, which finally said, no, doctors have this pesky First Amendment right to be able to talk about things. And only then did medical marijuana survive. But there were so many other attacks. Oakland Cannabis Buyers Club, Raich v. Gonzalez, where we tried to prove that if someone is using medical marijuana with no profit motive and completely within a state, how could the feds ban that under the Commerce Clause? And turns out they can. Because you might commerce in it someday, somehow, somewhere, and it might affect someone else's commerce. I'm telling you, marijuana court decisions are crazy. So it's not a one-to-one analogy. And furthermore, the idea that the states don't have the resources to go after medical marijuana or legalized marijuana rests on the fact that there are thousands and thousands of independent vendors going on. If you wanted to pinch it off at the state level, There's still nothing stopping the Drug Enforcement Administration from arresting a state's cannabis board for a RICO conspiracy to violate federal laws. The feds really haven't tried to pinch it at the state level, because up until now, most of the federal administrations have had a laissez-faire attitude toward marijuana legalization. That doesn't have to be the case, though. They could shut it down real quick, and boy, I'm telling you, once ICE runs out of migrants to arrest and create 13th Amendment slaves out of, the slaves that are legal so long as they're being punished for a crime, I could bet you that the federal government could clamp down on all these states that are running all these illegal state marijuana operations, start flying some federal helicopters in, raiding some of these farms in the Northern Triangle and Southern Oregon, sending shockwaves and scares throughout the whole community, creating a whole new crop of people to be arrested and turned into new slave labor for whatever corporation or farm that needs them because they can't get the immigrants anymore. Telling you, it's not the same. And if we try to do this soft secession, not paying federal taxes, you got the same enforcement thing where they could just go in at the state level, go get your state escrow guy, arrest him, perp walk him, put him on federal charges. How quick would that shit get shut down? I'm not saying don't try it. I'm just saying don't think that marijuana legalization was some easy peasy, simple thing that didn't have a whole lot of opposition and a whole lot of heartbreak and a whole lot of loss and arrest, even deaths in some cases.
They don't vote Democrat, they don't drive Cadillacs, and they never use personal vehicles.
Time to look over to my right and see what the Republicans are up to, and oh boy, am I loving the MAGA Civil War. If you haven't been following this, Tucker Carlson had Nick Fuentes on for an interview. Nick Fuentes is a Nazi, an unapologetic Nazi, a white nationalist who hates the Jews, like pure, uncut Nazi. And so that led to Heritage Foundation guy defending him and then pulling back a defense of him. And this discussion, is it too far right? Should we have these people in our movement? I don't care. Do what you want. Bring in all the Nazis in your movement. I think it's a whole lot better. Let's have them all on your side. Take Graham Plattner with you, with him and his tattoo. Y'all can be Nazis and fight over that. I think that's great. Just keep that subject in the news. It really, really helps your electoral process. But the other MAGA civil war is, of course, over these Epstein files and the fact that we've got Republicans in the House, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Thomas Massie, who signed on to the discharge petition and are leading the fight here, along with Ro Khanna, the progressive from Silicon Valley, to have these Epstein files released. And it's breaking Trump. I love this because it's breaking Trump, because part of his coalition was to bring on the crazies. There's the right wing has always had this, John Bircher, One New World Order, Illuminati, conspiracy theory, sect of their party. They've always had these guys believe in the deep state. And so many of them were adherents to this QAnon bullshit about there being this elite cabal of powerful men, billionaires and Democrats who control the world and are preying on children in a pedophile global child trafficking sex ring and harnessing their adrenochrome to live forever, and the crazies, well represented by Marjorie Taylor Greene. So he brought the crazies on, and Trump becomes a mythical figure in this QAnon cult. He's going to be the leader that brings upon the storm. He's the outsider who's going to take down the deep state, the billionaire who cannot be bought. And these MAGA now are seeing this billionaire continually being bought. Most recently, the Swiss bringing him a literal 1 kilogram bar of gold. The Koreans giving him a gold crown from an empire that was known for its corruption, not being subtle at all. Just open graft. We have the continuing resolution passing that gives the 8 senators who were investigated their phone metadata records subpoenaed under Jack Smith for the January 6th insurrection. They get a right of cause to sue for $1 million for the indignity of being investigated for, crimes. They're looking at giving General Flynn, Mike Flynn, that traitor, $50 million. Just come on, sidle up to the Treasury. Here's your $50 million. Trump's still talking about getting $230 million out of the Justice Department for his legal fees and suffering and damage to his reputation of being investigated by the special counsel. They know the end is coming. Trump knows he's dying. The rest of them know that the MAGA movement can't live without Trump. So now it's just everybody back the truck up to the Treasury, get all the money you can while you can. There so needs to be consequences for this. Democrats not running on a platform of affordability and consequences deserve to lose the next election. If you're not running on affordability and consequences, you deserve to lose. People want consequences for all of this law breaking. It happens to us, it should happen to them. But they're all broken up. The rats are starting to flee the sinking ship, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to make this face turn now, appearing on The View, talking about needing to release the Epstein files. Just can't understand why Donald Trump would be blocking them. Folks, don't be fooled by Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's not had a change of heart or morals or ethics. She is a shark. She is a cunning animal that knows which way the wind is blowing. She's trying to get ahead of it. This is still Jewish space lasers lady. This is still the lady that followed around and hectored David Hogg as a teenager, claiming he was a crisis actor, faking the results of Parkland and the horrible killing there. This is still Marjorie Taylor Greene, who yelled out at the State of the Union, disgracing herself, disgracing the House. It's the same lady, but she is useful as a weather vane that tells us which way the MAGA world is going, and it's starting to crumble. It's starting to fall apart. As Marjorie Taylor Greene has gone on these shows and called for the release of the Epstein files, Trump has been attacking her. In one tweet, he called her Marjorie Trader Greene. That's okay. That's a good one. Marjorie Trader Greene. That's right in the strike zone of your Trump insult names. That's a good one. But then he started to go off on Marjorie Taylor Brown because grass turns brown when it rots. Dude, if you're having to explain your nicknames, they're not good nicknames. Marjorie Taylor Brown, that's not going to stick. But he's been attacking her online. And, of course, she has gotten the resultant flying monkey attacks, people brigading on her and, posting threats. And then she has to respond, I can't believe these people are posting threats. This is terrible that people would threaten people like this. Says the lady who helped get people threatened many times. I can't believe the leopards would eat my face. And the fact that Trump's turning on her, someone who has been a crazy in total support of Trump other than this Epstein thing, shows Trump's weakness. Shows his weakness amongst this crazy base. Shows them, hey, wait a minute. He said Kamala was for they, them, and he was for me, but he doesn't look like he's for Marjorie. It looks like he's only for the people who are always for him. And if you ever turn on him, he turns on you. Gosh, I don't know if I want to be supporting pedophiles, right? It's this fracture that's happening now in their minds. Marjorie Taylor Greene is creating this permission structure for the crazies. And some of the others on the right, maybe not so crazy, to start to doubt this absolute allegiance to King Trump. And he can't help but make it worse because he went after another one. He went after Thomas Massie, who is the co-sponsor of the discharge petition along with Ro Khanna. And this one, so Thomas Massie's wife, Rhonda, died unexpectedly back in June of 2024, like a year and a half ago. They'd been married for 31 years. Sad. This man loses his wife of 31 years unexpectedly, June of 2024. This last week, he announces his marriage to a woman named Carolyn. They are married on October 19th. So after a year and a half of mourning, he's found a new love and they're getting married. And that's wonderful. Nobody thinks that that's too soon, right? This is certainly not Erica Kirk in her leather pants giving quite the hug to the vice president who's married just a month or two after her husband's dead. No, nothing like that. This all seems on the up and up, seems for real. So Trump goes out and tweets, "Did Thomas Massie, sometimes referred to as Rand Paul Jr. because of the fact that he always votes against the Republican Party, get married already? Boy, that was quick. No wonder the polls have him at less than an 8% chance of winning the election. Anyway, have a great life, Thomas, and question mark. His wife will soon find out that she's stuck with a loser." Wow, man. Even Trump's former lawyer, Jenna Ellis, thought this was beyond the pale. She wrote a 5-paragraph tweet about this, saying at the end of it, "Some things are still sacred and should still be beyond this kind of political mudslinging." Cracks are beginning to form. These Republicans are starting to realize that Trump has no allegiances to anything but Trump. Keep pushing on these Epstein files, and again, call your local representative, your congressional representative, and tell them to vote yes on tomorrow's vote to release the Epstein files.
That means a lot coming from a guy who painted his head like some sort of sports ball.
All right, time to see what's happening this week in the world of sports ball. And yay, my Green Bay Packers won their game against the New York Football Giants, 27-20. Good to hear. My Lady Loves Colts had the week off, but they're still at the top of the standings of their division. My Boise State Broncos stunk up the joint. Oh, my God, Boise State sucked. Another game. They lose this time to San Diego State, and they score another game they lose where they score just 7 points. They have 4 losses this year. Each loss, 7 points. That's not going to get it done on the blue, and I would like to encourage Coach Danielson to pray harder. Apparently Jesus isn't enough. I need you to call in some backups. Muhammad, Buddha, whoever else you can get. We got to get our Broncos into a bowl game. But I also wanted to talk about what's happening in the sports gambling sector. Once again, another week where we get some headlines about cheating in the sports gambling, fixing the so-called prop bets. This was 2 pitchers from the Cleveland Guardians, and I don't have their names on me immediately, but the one thing I noticed when I saw their pictures is they're not white. So far, the pictures of everyone I've seen in all these stories having to do with this fixing of sports gambling, no white people. I'm not saying there are not any white people fixing sports gambling, but the stories and the pictures I see of the athletes that they're focusing on, the ones that are getting the headline attention, Black and Latino. That's what I'm saying. So is this intentional on the media? Is this an effect of the sports leagues being largely populated by non-white people? Or is this selective prosecution? Are we not prosecuting the white people? Or are we selectively not focusing on them in the media? Whichever way it goes, it seemed a little fishy to me. The latest scandal has to do with these pitchers and the fact that they could fix their pitches. Like, you can bet on whether a guy's going to throw a pitch into the dirt. Like, these bets have become so granular, so atomized to every particular instance of a thing that can happen at even the smallest scale of a single pitch, a single free throw, then of course there's going to be some corruption in that. Because the guy who's going to be corrupted is not going to feel like doing that act is that corrupt. Like one pitch out of 60 or 70 I might throw in a game. One pitch when it's the very first pitch and we don't even have anyone on base or any runs scored. Who could that hurt? So again, and I've called on this in the previous podcast, we need to outlaw prop bets. Any sort of bet where one person can throw the bet needs to be outlawed. It's a lot harder to get an entire team to throw a game. But these single person event prop bets need to be made illegal. And again, I don't think we should make sports gambling illegal because, again, it'll still just happen anyway. It'll happen with the mob doing it and breaking legs of people that don't pay back and having no sophisticated data analysis to catch the people that are cheating. Which brings me to the other point of that, which is this sports gambling, the fact that it's so ubiquitous now and so foisted upon the people and integrated in the sports and their broadcasts, is that creating more sports gambling cheating, or is it revealing it? Because now that it's legal, these places like DraftKings and BetMGM and all these guys, FanDuel, they can run all those bets through computer algorithms in real time and see where there's a statistically unlikely spike in betting that would lead to someone trying to fix a game or fix a prop bet. Is it easier now to catch, is what I'm trying to say. Is the sports gambling easier now to catch and prosecute now that it's legal and audited? You know, I make a comparison. This is kind of the marijuana episode, so I'll make a comparison to marijuana legalization. After we legalized marijuana, oh my God, suddenly all these kids are going to the ER for having ingested cannabis. They accidentally got high on the gummies. Oh my God, is legalization creating all of these accidental poisonings? Or is it the case that kids have always got into these things? But the times when it was illegal, when you took them to the ER, you kind of said, oh, what did he eat? Oh, gee, maybe we had some bad leftovers, or gosh, maybe he got into one of my prescriptions, right? When it's illegal, you're not going to tell the ER at the entrance there that it was pot, right? So did legalization just reveal something that's always happened, or has it created it? I think there's probably a little of both. I think, of course, when you legalize marijuana, that's going to create more access for the adults to get the gummies and all the other things, and that means more likelihood of those things being left out. That means more likelihood of the kids getting them. But also, now that it's legal, we have more accurate reporting of when it does happen. I think something similar in sports gambling. Of course, now that we've made sports gambling more ubiquitous and easier access through the apps, more people are going to be corrupted into doing bad things with it. But again, because it's legal, now we have the transparency and the auditing to be able to catch those things when they happen.
Walter's from Idaho.
I thought I'd come outside because I'm from Idaho.
Hey there, it's time for our Boycott Idaho segment where I explain to you all the reasons why you should avoid the handmade state. Now with 76 reasons. You can find them all at radicalruss.com/Idaho. And the number one reason that I avoid the state of Idaho is its illegality of marijuana. Idaho is the most illegal marijuana state in the United States to this day. They are the only state in America that has a $300 mandatory minimum fine for marijuana possession. It's the only state that has a mandatory minimum fine for marijuana possession. And as far as I know, one of the few that have a mandatory minimum fine for any sort of misdemeanor. But yes, you will get fined $300 if they catch you with weed in Idaho, and it's still a crime. It's not just you're going to pay a $300 fine and be sent on your way like a ticket. You can still be physically arrested, cuffs slapped on you, thrown into the back of the car, drive down to the station, take your mugshot, take your fingerprints, create a criminal arrest record that will follow you around for the rest of your life, and you're going to get a mandatory minimum $300 fine. So Idaho really does not like the marijuana. But since about 2012, every 2 years, there has been an attempt to get medical marijuana on the Idaho ballot. It's the only state in the West that has never voted on any sort of marijuana legalization effort. We had the marijuana decriminalization all the way back in 1973 in Oregon that was followed by most of the Western states throughout the 70s, Nevada in the 90s. We had the medical marijuana movement, which began in 1996 in California and then spread throughout the West throughout the 90s. And it was during that time it was spreading through the West that Idaho got terrified that since it's another one of the Western states that has the citizen initiative power, citizens would use that power to put marijuana on the ballot and it would pass. And then once 2012 came around and Colorado and Washington passed legalization, that's when the fear really ramped up. And Idaho was certain that all those big money pot legalization interests would be pouring money into the state and getting marijuana legalized. And I'm here to tell you that didn't happen. I've been a part of just about every attempt to pass marijuana legalization, medical marijuana in the state of Idaho since 2012, when I was working for Normal and working independently after that. And boy, we've tried. We've circulated various petitions, 2012, 2014, 2016, I really got involved. 2018, we came the closest because the 2018, 2020 is when we came the closest. So many different initiatives. We didn't get it in 2020 because we got 44,000 signatures and then the COVID epidemic hit and we had to stop signature gathering and we didn't get it on the ballot. And throughout every one of these efforts, also in 2022, big money never showed up. Nobody was ever interested for a moment at throwing even $10,000 at the state of Idaho. And believe me, I tried. We came close again in 2020. We were working with the Marijuana Policy Project, trying to set up some donors. Never happened. Everybody wanted to put their money into South Dakota. So when I heard that there was another effort for medical marijuana coming up here in 2026, I also tried in 2024. I was skeptical because I know the activist base in Idaho. I know the situation on the ground there. There's no money for donations. Nobody serious wants to get involved with it. That may have changed. Apparently, there is a new group in Idaho, the Natural Medicine Alliance of Idaho, and it has been constituted with members from a high-profile public relations firm in Boise, a high-profile law firm in Boise, and a high-profile real estate agent from the Sun Valley area, apparently one who had worked with Bruce and Demi Moore, and funds and runs a children's cancer camp. So these folks have gotten together, apparently, formed their group. They've apparently reportedly gotten donations from some of the hemp farmers in the state of Idaho. And again, that dovetails back into our previous segment talking about this hemp industry being cut down in its prime. They've gotten donations from them that I have heard have been in the $750,000 range, and that they're talking about doing paid signature gathering to get medical marijuana on the ballot for 2026 at something like $5 a signature. Now, understand, you don't need a lot of signatures in the state of Idaho. I think it's about 70,000 this go round. So 70,000 signatures times $5 a signature is $350,000, and you've already got 750,000. Good Lord, what I could have done with that back in 2020. Oh, I'm a little jelly. I got to be honest, I'm a little jelly. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that maybe I wasn't the right guy to take it on, being radical and all, being Mr. Progressive from Portland. Maybe I'm not the right guy to legalize medical marijuana in the state of Idaho. I'm humble enough to accept that. And I'm supportive of this group going forward. Boy, if they can get medical marijuana passed, that's great. Now, what they're trying to pass for medical marijuana there isn't what we'd recognize in most of the Western states. It's going to be very limited. If my sources are correct, they're writing this with a little bit of regulatory capture. The rumor I've heard is that there will only be 3 licensed cannabis growing facilities for the medical products. Coincidentally, there were 3 of these hemp farmers that went and invested in it. So, yeah, some of that going on, some of those funny businesses. That's happened in other states too. And most notably, a lack on their list of qualifying conditions for chronic pain. They'll cover PTSD, cancer, Alzheimer's, epilepsy, those kind of things. Things that it's really easy to get a validated and objectively verifiable diagnosis of. Things for which you can say, look at this x-ray, or look at this MRI, or look at this blood test, or look at this gastric test, or whatever, and verify it. But they're reticent to put chronic pain, my guess being that that's the loophole. I told you earlier that we stoners will find a loophole, we'll drive through it. And that's the loophole they want to give people. Ironically, the scientific evidence we have for cannabis treating pain is better and more numerous than the evidence we have for it treating just about anything else. So if you're just going by the science, pain would be the number one thing you'd recommend cannabis for. But again, trying to get it passed in the state of Idaho, you might want to keep quiet on that. So this Natural Medicine Alliance going forth, and if they're going to pay $5 a signature, I have no doubt they can get this on the 2026 ballot, because that's all we were ever lacking. With volunteer signature gathering, people working for free, we got 44,000 signatures during a pandemic year. So I think they can do this. I think for sure they could get this on the ballot. But that leads to a showdown. Because another thing that's on the ballot for 2026, and this is guaranteed, it will be on the ballot, is HJR 4, House Joint Resolution 4, which is a proposed constitutional amendment proposed by the state legislature that takes away marijuana legalization in any form for anybody from the purview of the citizen initiative process. That's right. They want to pass a constitutional amendment to make medical marijuana initiatives illegal. Or I should say impossible, right? It's not like you'd be thrown in jail for trying to pass one around. It would just be pointless, right? They want to make it so only the legislature can pass any laws relating to marijuana or other narcotics, they say. But we know this is about marijuana. Only the legislature can pass laws relating to marijuana, and then only by a 2/3 majority. So even if the federal government descheduled cannabis and said anybody who wants to have cannabis for any reason whatsoever, go ahead, have it, Idaho would still have criminal penalties for marijuana, mandatory minimum fines for possession, long prison sentences for growing, and couldn't change that unless 2/3 of the legislature said so. Now, where this gets a little dicey in the activism side of things is my sources in Idaho tell me that the prior activist groups that have been working on this are somewhat divided. Some of them have kind of stepped aside and let natural medicine do their thing and have been wholly following them and their edicts about how to promote this measure. And one of their edicts is, don't talk about HJR 4. And some of the other activists are like, wait a minute, if HJR 4 passes, it doesn't matter what we do with medical marijuana. If a statutory initiative gets on the ballot and a constitutional amendment gets on the ballot, and they both pass, the constitutional amendment wins, and it doesn't matter how much the medical marijuana initiative passes. The medical marijuana initiative could get 75%. If HJR 4 gets 50% plus 1, it wins. And there is no medical marijuana in the state of Idaho. So I would think if there were something on the ballot that could kill my initiative, I would want to tell voters to vote against that. But that's not what natural medicine says. They say don't talk about that HJR 4, just talk about the medical marijuana. Okay, I'm sure they have a reason. I don't know that it's a good one. But good luck to the folks out there in the state of Idaho. And if you can get medical marijuana passed there, especially if you can get reciprocity for out-of-state medical marijuana cards, I might just have to visit sometime.
I got a lot of problems with you people. Now, you're going to hear about it.
Today Today in the Radical Rant, I want to talk about the Ninth Amendment Foundation. It doesn't exist, but it should exist. The Ninth Amendment Foundation. You know, we don't talk much about the Ninth Amendment. People know the First Amendment, freedom of speech, petition, religion, press, assembly. We know the Second Amendment, bear arms. People don't really know the Third Amendment much, but that's when you can't quarter soldiers. Fourth Amendment, no unreasonable search and seizures. Fifth Amendment, can't incriminate yourself. No double jeopardy, due process. Sixth Amendment, right to jury trial. Seventh Amendment, right to civil trials. Eighth Amendment, no cruel and unusual punishment. 10th Amendment, states' rights. Nobody really focuses much on the Ninth Amendment. And it's a very simple amendment, just one sentence. It says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Now, my plain reading of that is, just because we wrote a bunch of stuff down in the Constitution doesn't mean you don't also have other rights. Just because we wrote down you have the freedom of speech and the freedom to religion and all that stuff doesn't mean we wrote everything down. Of course you have a bunch of rights that we didn't mention, and just because we didn't mention them does not deny or disparage them. You still have these other rights that we didn't mention. I like to think of the Ninth Amendment as the personal rights amendment, because it goes right there with the states' rights, right? 10th Amendment, states' rights, Ninth Amendment, personal rights. So I think we ought to have a Ninth Amendment Foundation, just like we have the ACLU to defend the First Amendment and the NRA to defend the Second Amendment. We ought to have a personal rights group that fights for our Ninth Amendment rights and begins to enumerate what they are. In my mind, if we have personal rights, then those rights mean our rights to bodily sovereignty, cognitive liberty, and personal property. Where the Constitution can grant rights to what states can do, constrain what states can do, grant rights to what the president, the legislature, and the courts can do, constrains what they can do. The Ninth Amendment protects what we can do to ourselves. It protects our rights over our own body and mind. In the case of bodily sovereignty, there's a lot of areas where this would be salient. The right to sex work. It's my body. I have a right to do with it what I please, with other people who also wish to do those things with me, given that they are all capable of legal consent. Right? They're not coerced, not brainwashed. There's not a power dynamic. They're not children. So long as we all consent, we get to put any pole in any hole we want. Whatever we want to do, that's cool by me. And since we also have a right to personal property, we should have a right to rent our bodies to other people. Sex work should be completely legal. That's not to say it shouldn't be regulated. Certainly it should be regulated. Nevada has some great laws on that. Germany has some laws on that. But it should absolutely be legal. Gender identification, how you wish to present yourself. Absolutely bodily sovereignty. I should be able to wear whatever I want to wear, dress how I want to dress, regardless if someone thinks that fits my gender. If I want to go to work in a skirt, ought to be my right. There can be dress codes, but they should be something that are gender neutral. If women can have painted fingernails, men can have painted fingernails. If women can wear earrings, multiple earrings, men can wear multiple earrings or nose rings or whatever. Our right to bodily sovereignty should include the right to modify our bodies any way we like. Any sort of piercings, tattoos. Hell, you want to get your leg cut off. Should be legal. Regulated, for sure, but should be legal. And that goes with gender-affirming care, too. If I want to take hormones to grow my breasts, it shouldn't matter whether I'm male or female. It's my body. I want to grow boobies. I'm going to grow boobies. And of course, under bodily sovereignty, we'd have birth control and abortion. How anybody ever thought that a government had the right to tell people whether or not to have kids and when blows my mind. Cognitive liberty, the other plank here, the other leg of the stool. Cognitive liberty should include our right to mess with our consciousness through the use of drugs or computers or implants or whatever, however we wish to alter our consciousness, so long as it's done in a safe setting that can't harm others, should be legal. You want to take acid, ayahuasca, DMT, PCP, whatever, should be legal. Our right to privacy is part of our cognitive liberty. Nobody has the right to peek in on what we're doing in our private life. And that includes our right to our likeness. No one should be able to reproduce our likeness without our personal permission. And I don't mean in cases of like parody, right? Obviously you can do parody and caricatures and things like that. But I'm talking like this thing we saw the other day where they released an AI. This was Cuomo released an AI that had Zoran Mamdani knocking on people's doors. And it was a realistic, like, this looks like and sounds like Zoran Mamdani. Like, where do you draw that line? I think there ought to be a point at which you can't generate AI likenesses of me and my voice. Like, there should be like an automatic copyright on that. Like, you own your own likeness and voice. And for that matter, your data. This data that we generate every day with every click, with every movement that we make that is collected and auctioned off to these various data brokers and companies, we should get paid for that. Anytime your data is used, it ought to be like collecting royalties. You know, like when some singer on a one-hit wonder back in the 60s gets a check every month, it's for like 16 cents or whatever. Yeah, it should be something like that, where we're getting royalty checks from these data brokers. Hey, your data was accessed 42,000 times this month. Here's your check for $20 or whatever it is. Doesn't have to be a whole lot, but we should own our own data and have the right to have it not be aggregated and used without our express permission. Same for digital identification. I think we ought to have the right to our own digital likeness. Like, I'm Radical Russ on just about everything out there. And so you go to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all these things, I'm Radical Russ everywhere. But only because I got on those things immediately and grabbed the name Radical Russ. There ought to be a way that once you've designated a handle for yourself, a digital identifier like Radical Russ, it ought to be yours. Like having your own domain name, kind of. It ought to be something you own that other people can't use. I had to sign up for something the other day. I go to sign up for it as Radical Russ, and someone else already had that name. So now I got to remember that on one of these things, I'm Radical Russ ID. On another one, I'm Radical Russ ! On another one, I'm Real Radical Russ. Now, we should just be able to have and own our own digital identification. And finally, the third leg of the stool for our Ninth Amendment Foundation, our right to personal property. And this would include things like the right to repair. You've heard about this, where like farmers go and buy a tractor from John Deere. It breaks down. They can't repair it. It gets bricked. It gets locked out. You can't repair it. And you have to use their technician. They have to use their part. No. None of this tying us to our corporate overlords by forcing us to have to take their repairs. No, we ought to have a right to repair our own stuff with the parts we choose, with the technicians we choose. And we ought to have a right to modify, sell, and protect our personal property within reason. So that's my idea. I think we ought to have a Ninth Amendment Foundation. I'd be glad to be the president of it, spokesperson, whatever. But you know me, I need some money. Anybody want to throw a couple $1 million at starting a Ninth Amendment Foundation? Maybe helping me hire real professionals to run it? I'm all for it. It's not like anyone else is going to hire me at 57. Well, that's all the time we've got this week for the Smoke Session. The Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belville, and governed by Creative Commons Share-alike licensing. News, music, and video clips and social media posts are reproduced under fair use copyright laws for commentary and analysis. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and interstitial music is by Russ Boom Boom Belleville.
What's the boom boom for?
Boom, boom, boom.
Which brings us to our post-credits scene. I saw something come across my feed, originally from X, but it came on my Blue Sky feed because I don't hang out in Nazi pubs. From @AlexFeinberg1, apparently a guy who used to play minor league baseball. And he writes, very few Major League Baseball players lean left, meaning politically left, not like how they wear their trousers. Very few Major League Baseball players lean left because you can't be a good baseball player and also believe that you're a victim. That's the right-wing framing that, liberals are victimhood mentality, right? That thing. Anyway, he continues. Everyone who has played baseball long enough realizes that life is unfair and it is your job to exploit the unfairness. And there, folks, I think you have the most perfect distilled crystallization of modern American conservatism I have ever heard. Life is unfair, and it is your job to exploit the unfairness. Not to ameliorate it, not to rectify it, not to fight against the unfairness, not to help those who have been exploited by it. Your job is to exploit the unfairness. Chef's kiss. You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com. Call my message line at 877-RUSS-420. That's 877-877-420. And reach me on social media on Blue Sky as radicalruss.com and nowhere else. You can support this podcast financially by donating to @RadicalRuss on Venmo, RadRuss on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next week, take care of each other.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
Oh, just one more thing, sir. I was thinking...
Have you heard that the #1 song on the country music charts was completely written by artificial intelligence? That the #1 country song is completely generated by a computer by aggregating and compiling every redneck stereotype into a simple formulaic slop meant to stir up patriarchal jingoism is unique only for the word a computer replacing Nashville.